Franca became Latin. It was Romanized. And he is going back and forth with the Pope because there are these books called the apocrypha that the Pope really wants included. And they were important windows. I want to be very clear into 300 years, 2nd century BC to 100 AD, what we call the intertestamental period, right up to the age of the New Testament. They were interesting windows into that time period, but they're not historical by any means. I want to make that very clear. There was a very interesting Jewish mystical tradition, and that's where we get Jubilees and Tobit and Enoch, the book of Enoch. And so Jerome is going back and forth with the Pope, and finally they compromise, and he includes the Apocrypha as an appendix in the Latin completed Bible. A lot of people, you might not be aware, the original King James Version that we all love from 1611 actually includes the books of the Apocrypha. It's 11 to 13, depending on how you count them. So it's a library. So that's context, okay? So the Ethiopian tradition is interesting because they include First Enoch, which is 108 chapters, the first 37 of which are called the Book of Watchers. And it gets really into some very speculative ideas about the Nephilim, which is this interesting race mentioned in Genesis 6, which, by the way, those first few verses, and you can quote me on this, in Genesis 6, is the weirdest part of the Bible. We do not have that much information. Of course, in Hebrew, if you know your Hebrew, nephal is the verb that means fallen. So that's where we get this idea of maybe they're demons, maybe they're just angelic beings. So Nephilim is the plural noun of nephal in Hebrew. I don't know if that was ever explained to you from a word study. So that's where we get this idea of this sentient race that copulates with women to produce this hybrid race. We don't know anything about it besides the first 5 or 6 verses of Genesis. Perhaps, and again, we speculate. And so fast forward to 300 BC, okay? So what? I mean, are we 3,000 years later? Are we 6,000 years later? We're in 300 BC. We're in this unique milieu of Jewish mystical writing, and the book of Enoch begins to speculate for 37 chapters about who this race was, who these giants are. And it's really fun and interesting and maybe even perhaps edifying for certain groups, but it's not historical